make sure that you learn about your midterm grade. Well, I hope everyone did his or her best. I want everyone to receive the highest grade possible, right? But have to be convinced that you deserve that high grade that you're hoping for, right? Any comments on the midterm exam? You know, if I had it my way, I think we've had a 3-hour exam. Don't you think so? In just an hour and 15 minutes to test your knowledge about all the things that we talked about, it's just not enough. Right? So, anyway, one announcement. Actually, I'll wait till Thursday. The announcement has to do with the classes that will be canceled because I'll be going abroad to participate in conferences. So the lectures will not be affected. Okay? Meaning lectures will continue as scheduled, just on different dates. Okay? So the makeup classes will comprise of your presentations. Do you follow what I'm saying? So let's say I cancel next 3 classes. But when we meet again on the regularly scheduled classes, we'll continue with the lectures. The makeup classes that we come up with will comprise of your presentations. So that some of you who cannot make to those makeup classes, you'll be excused and you'll not be missing anything, right? Okay. And good thing about your final exam, we'll cover only, 3 topics? Or 4 at the most, right? So you'll be less tasked with reading. Okay? Today's topic and for the next class is urbanization in Korea. And this is what's in store for you. I guess the key thing would be characteristics and problems of urbanization in Korea, and the final exam, comparison of urbanization in the West and Korea, because there are qualitative differences. Okay? And the first thing I want to talk about is this. I don't know how many of you actually thought about urbanization as being one of the most significant trends, but as with many concepts that end with zation, right? So there's globalization, there's industrialization, modernization, democratization. Just for fun, am I missing anything that represents a significant trend that is that sort of ends with nation? Think of one. It's up there. They pretty much cover everything, right? But I think this is something that if you really think about it, and if you come up with something really new, then let me know. All right. And urbanization has radically changed traditional patterns of social life, the nature of human communities. And study of urbanization is important because the way we live our life, and we're now living in an urban setting, right? And there are many qualitative differences between life in rural setting and life in urban setting. And I want you to really think about this question. Okay? What are the differences between life in rural and urban settings? Again, the premise here is that we live in an urban setting, and the study of urbanization is important because everything we do, not everything, but a lot of things we do are shaped by the fact that we live in an urban setting. So, what are some of the differences that you see that exist between life in rural area versus life in a city setting? What could be some of the differences, the most important ones? So you can say things like, in rural area, you know, people are like this, but in urban setting, people are like this, or like that, and that's how they're different. Yes?
The relationship between people, although there is more people in the city, it's more
Alone. So, like the saying, lonely crowd. There are more people, but the relationships are rather impersonal. But in rural setting, practically everyone knows each other, right? And the relationships are very intimate. Okay, so that could be one. What else? Yes. Okay, so life itself is more fast-paced in urban setting.
And in urban settings, you have a problem, you have to fix your own, but in rural areas, your community more.
Or you can just call on experts in urban settings to come and help, but in rural areas, you just call your friend to fix your problem. What else?
How people make a living is different. People in the city may have office jobs, while people in the rural communities farm.
Okay, people in the rural areas, let's say they're sort of self-sufficient, whereas in rural urban settings, your work is more specialized, so that you are sort of interdependent, okay, on each other for let's say to make your life convenient. What else? Yeah.
Educational opportunities and attainment.
Educational opportunities and attainment are more available in urban settings. But one real major difference between rural areas and urban areas is yeah.
To farm work.
You
Farm work.
You find work.
Farm.
Farm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's been mentioned. Good. Anyone else? Yeah. Financial hubs. Okay. Financial hubs are exclusive to urban settings. But the key term that I was looking for is that urban life offers you anonymity, right? So you could do things, maybe even some crazy things, without the fear of your identity being revealed. Although, with the advent of the internet, that is increasingly becoming not so guaranteed as before. But in comparison to rural life, definitely you have more anonymity, right? Living in an urban setting. So you could do, for example, we shared how divorce rates are much higher in urban settings because of, nobody really knows except your, close friends and maybe even, maybe your relatives don't even know about your, one being divorced. So I think this is a key characteristic, and also because of that, we hear of many stories where a person getting beaten up, getting robbed, or even getting raped and not being helped by people sort of who definitely see this crime being committed but not getting involved. Okay, we call that bystander apathy, and that's a phenomenon unique to urban setting. Okay, and there was even really a famous case in the United States where this woman was beaten to death in this apartment complex, and the studies later found that there were dozens of people who saw this beating taking place, and people in the apartments actually saw it because she was screaming, right? But nobody helped. And this kind of bystander apathy is again a phenomenon unique to an urban setting. And this really sad story in Korea from a few years ago. We have a small, we call it in Korean 다세대 주택. What is that in English? But it's a housing complex where you have up to like 10 households living. Okay, so we're talking about a small apartments. Okay, now in this case, this man was mistakenly seen as a burglar, but he was a resident of one of the apartments. So the person who saw this man as a burglar got into a sort of a fist fight, okay? And this man who was mistaken to be a burglar died from this little fisticuff, right? So again, this idea that people live in urban settings anonymously can sometimes lead to sort of disturbing accident like this, right? Is there anybody who with sort of a story about an urban life that is sort of either disturbing or interesting? Yes.
In France, still there is still accidental trains, subway, where humans were being raped in front of all the others, and no one.
On the train,
Yes.
subway,
Two
or
different cities.
ah, my God, terrible. Anyone else? Or if I were to ask you, did you ever witness anything that to which you could have intervened but you didn't? Bystander apathy. One time, I think when I was talking about culture, I told you about me jumping onto the subway track. About 2 weeks ago. Man, I should be doing some good citizen of order. I was eating odeng. You guys know what odeng is? Fish cake at Busan Odeng. one of the subway stations. And this drunken man walks in and tries to just take one stick of odeng, but he was stopped, not physically, by an attendant. She was a middle-aged woman. She said, you have to pay, right? But this guy was like, no, why should I pay? And he was about to walk away, but she was, almost like screaming, stop it, right? You gotta pay. And the man got pissed off, and now he wanted to go inside to the kitchen. And there I was, eating my odeng, and not really knowing what to do, because if he was allowed in, he would easily feed her, right? So what did I do? I go behind this man and grab him like this, right? And and because the guy could really like hurt me by doing this, like jerking his head, I'm holding this guy at the same time, and I was telling, because there were other bystanders, right? I was like saying, please help me. But nobody came to help. But as I was holding this guy, the woman called the security, and it took forever. Because the guy was trying to get out of my grab or grip, and I was just trying my hardest, just holding on with my head just tilted back like this. But there was again, nobody wanted to get involved. And after this, I promised myself I'll never do this again. Because if I get hurt, I'm left with nothing, what citizens are? Shit that, second time that I got really had my wife totally get mad at me because I was a nice guy. But anyway, so if you could think of other sort of differences between life in rural and urban settings, you could write to me, okay? All right. Now we turn to the definition of urbanization, and demographically, the term urbanization denotes redistribution of populations from rural to urban areas, and definitions vary somewhat amongst different nations, but it's about the minimum density requirement, okay? Or it's useful to sometimes look at the definition of city, okay? And city is used to designate an urban settlement with a large population, and believe it or not, countries differ in designating or granting this city status to its areas. Okay, so here are some examples. In Korea, to be designated as a city, you need to have at least 150,000 inhabitants. Okay, now in China the number is 100,000. In Chile, it's 5,000. The UN recommends that countries regard places with more than 20,000 inhabitants as cities. Isn't this amazing? One of the key things of globalization is standardization. Okay, if you leave everything as it is, we have too many differences. So to make life convenient, we use the same standards. Okay, and these standards typically come from Western countries, right? You want key example would be the metric system. And but you know, there's things that are still not agreed upon as being like the universal standard, right? So that's the way it stands. And urban centers include 4 types of residential patterns: central city, suburbs that surround the central city, metropolis, central city plus suburbs, and megalopolis. Now, when you look at Seoul, so when you hear about a population of a given city, you always have to ask, does it include, is it referring to metropolis? For example, what's the population of Seoul as a city? It's about 10 million. What about Seoul population as a metro? It's up to 20 million. Now, what do you know the population of New York as, for example? I think about 16 million, right? Or LA being what, 8 million, 9 million? They're all metro population. Because city itself, the Los Angeles population maybe 1 million, okay? But when you look at the figures like 10 million, that includes the surrounding cities, okay? Or suburbs, okay? So, and that also is for Chicago. So many of the top cities in the United States, if you exclude metro, you have a different ranking. So you have to always make sure to ask yourself, does this include, or is this a reference to a metropolis of a given city, or just the city itself? And megalopolis is I'm sure it's a term that's rather new to you. This is a long, anyway. Megalopolis, it has been mentioned by that scholar to refer to this area that sort of covers many cities that, again, before this idea of megalopolis came about, our sort of conceptualizations of cities were limited to central city, suburbs, and metropolis. But this guy conceptualized this sort of long, big, much larger areas that covered many big cities. Okay, so if you look at the examples, for example, in the eastern seaboard of the United States, one megalopolis that he identified was Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. So you have these big cities, okay, that you sort of group together as forming some kind of a urban sort of a community. I mean, maybe that's not the right term, but so you could also find other examples like in Southern California, LA, San Diego, Santa Barbara area, and in Northern California, San Francisco, Oakland, Sacramento, Fresno, and so on. Now, if you use this concept, and this is a very US-centric, in a way, concept, is there a megalopolis in Korea? Yes, and which cities would we include? So Seoul, Incheon.
The whole urban thing.
Okay, yeah.
I would say that there is none.
There is none.
Because there is really
Well, I think, I mean, it's open to debate, but I think we could include sort of three things.